This is a movie review for the film The Lifeguard. Some basic facts about this film. It came out in 2013. Stars Kristen Bell, Mamie Gummer, and Martin Starr. Written and directed by Liz Garcia, who previously had written for television shows, and this is her directorial debut. Now, I know this came out a few years ago. I had watched it when it originally came out and enjoyed it, and recently found myself watching it again and enjoying it even more, though it turns out I might be in the minority here in terms of how this film was received. It has a 5.7 on IMDb, a Metascore of 34 by Metacritic. Roger Ebert only gave it 2 stars, Rotten Tomatoes 13%. But nonetheless, it was nominated for a Grand Jury Prize in the 2013 Sundance Film Festival. So sort of a mixed bag. Obviously, some folks seem to like it initially, and I guess over time it just hasn't done as well. To have a sense of what this film is about, the main character, Lee London, played by Kristen Bell, she is a talented journalist living in New York City. In the beginning, we find her accepting the end of a love affair with her editor as he becomes engaged to another woman. Cruelly so, he doesn't actually break this news directly to her face. She overhears them talking to a friend, and him claiming that he decided to get engaged because he had to, quote, man up. We see that this is one blow to her life. At the same time, she's also reporting on the story of a tiger cub that was kept tied up as someone's pet until it died of malnutrition. To her surprise, her piece is not run as serious news, and this kind of involves her sort of having a sort of breakdown. We see her arguing with her boss and her ex-lover, and sort of just both of these things, happen so close to each other, and sort of we get the sense that it's two things that she really cares about that sort of are falling apart on her. Maybe an overreaction, but she sort of starts to think about her larger life. We find her entirely disillusioned, all as she's approaching her 30th birthday. So she decides to just leave town, and she returns to her hometown in Connecticut. She doesn't tell anyone at work that she's doing this, and she doesn't tell her parents, whose house she's moving back into. Her mother is skeptical of her sudden return, wondering if she's having a breakdown, while her father is just delighted to see her. She rekindles 2 friendships that she had when she was last there. One with Todd, played by Martin Starr, who's an art appraiser, and Mel, who's played by Mamie Gummer, who's a vice principal at the high school that they'd went to. Both of these folks as well are sort of around the age 30 and are finding themselves similarly unfulfilled. It seems that they may have fallen into the lives that they're living. At the same time, Lee takes up her old high school job as a pool lifeguard. This sort of sequence is kind of reminiscent of if you've seen American Beauty, where we see middle-aged Lester Burnham, right? He quits his job in sales and returns to his high school job of flipping burgers. Or actually, I think he was fired. But nonetheless, with both of them, we get the sense, both Lester Burnham and Lee London, we get the sense that life is not as good as it once was when they were younger, and they're both are sort of returning to the lifestyle they had before. Here, in sort of encouraging this kind of lifestyle, she meets the maintenance man's 16-year-old son, little Jason, and over the next few weeks, they become friends, and she as well becomes friends with Jason's best friend, Matt. At the same time, she's encouraging both of her high school friends to exhibit sort of wild and carefree behavior, hanging out with these teenagers and smoking pot with them and drinking and such. Todd sort of happily goes along with Lee's nostalgia. He seems to be just as happy to return to that. And Mel does too, but it's more complicated as she's married and her husband are trying to conceive a baby. So you see, it's kind of at this point where she's trying to do this very adult thing, have a kid, and then yet she's engaging in all this behavior that's more of a teenager. And this sort of takes a toll on their marriage. At the same time, as Lee and Jason spend more time with one another, both come to realize their mutual attraction. A kiss quickly escalates into sex, and this starts a relationship between the two that continues through the summer. Meanwhile, Jason and his friend Matt are desperate to leave town and move to Vermont, where they imagine a better life awaits them both. Right, so you have these teenagers sort of looking forward, thinking that life is going to be better. And then you have these other folks, right, who are 30 and looking backwards, thinking life was better back then. Sort of this thing where, the grass is always greener, but no one is actually really fulfilled in their current state. Now, I could say more about the plot, but I would want you to watch the film, so I'm going to sort of leave it there. Safe to say, the reality eventually comes crashing down on all of these characters. Now, why I find this film compelling is the main reason that others did not is they thought that the film was sort of a cliche story. Middle-aged people wondering what are they doing with their lives and are they happy? And it seemed a lot of folks didn't like this film because it didn't necessarily flip that story on its head or tell it in a way that it's never been told before. And that's true. I can see the where people could have that impression of it. And I could see that as being a reason that maybe you're not going to want to watch it or don't find it engaging. But for me, I tend to like stories about people who their lives are not all together. Their lives are sort of falling apart. And this sense that maybe they need to take a break from life. They need to lose themselves for a moment in order to find themselves. I'm particularly attracted to these stories because I think there's so much pressure in our culture to sort of always present ourselves as, having our life together, to present our life story as one of just continual progress where things are always getting better. And we tend to either edit out the moments where things are falling apart, or we tend to hide them from others, that we're actually not very content in our life. And thus, for this reason, I like art that represents that and creates a conversation for that and wants to show that side of life. I'm also biased in particular, and maybe this is why I found the film more compelling now than when it came out, is much like the characters and the director too, the director and writer Liz Garcia. She was sort of around the same age, having had recently turned 30 herself. And as someone who is also going to be turning 30 soon, I do find myself wondering, what the hell am I doing in my life? And I feel that maybe I'm not as happy as I thought I would be at this point. And so for me, it's just, I do find characters like this compelling. It sheds some light on my own situation and how I feel about my life. Maybe what should be said about this film is that maybe it's only compelling for that kind of audience, for folks that are also in this age range. And that if you're not really in this age range, and not just that, but you don't have those feelings about your life, then yes, this all seems pretty cliche. But if you're caught up in that, then this film seems to have more to offer for you. The other reason I think this film is also compelling is our culture as well has no problem romanticizing a relationship between an older man and a younger woman. And thus I find it refreshing to see films that sort of are projecting the inverse thing, right? An older woman with a younger guy. I don't know how often that happens, but it's great to sort of see that, no, it doesn't always have to be that women always want someone older than them. That there's something similarly appealing, at least for some women. At the same time, you may think, well, this movie doesn't really depict that in any provocative way. Well, if you are interested in something like that, something more provocative and less cliche, then I would suggest watching actually another movie which also came out the same year in 2013 called Adore. And it's about a pair of childhood friends who as middle-aged women fall in love with each other's sons. That's as provocative as I think that sort of story can get. But the movie Adore really shows it in an interesting light. So again, if you're interested in that thing, then sort of seek out that movie. One other thing about this film that I think is compelling I do like seeing movies where a woman writes and directs a story where the main characters are women. I think it's good to sort of have stories that are about women being told by women. I think there are too many films out there where it is a male perspective presenting a story about women. For example, I really love Todd Solondz's Happiness, a story that's centered on three sisters that have taken very different paths in life and now being middle-aged as well find themselves questioning if their choices have led them to genuine happiness. And this story, for those that have seen it, it's as provocative as it comes, and it's as far from cliche as a movie could ever be. It is ultimately told from a male perspective, and in a certain way is a male fantasy. And so it's good to see sort of that balanced out, or to see that there are other films where it is a woman that gets to tell this kind of story. One last thing I do want to say about The Lifeguard and cliches is I think we should wonder, and I'm wondering this because so many of the reviews, this is the thing that they really hold against, that the reviewers hold against the film, is, does every film have to be groundbreaking and provocative and edgy to be seen as a good film, or to be seen as a film that's worth watching? I think if on some level we think that art imitates life, then some art is going to be cliche and in certain ways mundane, because life is in certain ways cliche and mundane. Life does have its really weird moments, but in other ways it doesn't. And I think there is beauty in art that is able to capture those kinds of aspects about life. And I think it's unfair to always let cliche nature of a story sort of prevent us from enjoying it at all. I enjoyed it, even if it only because it's capturing a certain moment in my life, and my hope is that you can enjoy it as well.